Hello and welcome back to another video. My name is Janet and I run a Depop, a website called Primarie Studios where I sell secondhand and vintage fashion. Today I'm doing something different. It's the first time I'm doing something like this on my channel, and I'm upcycling these pillowcases into this vest. I've actually completed the whole project. I'm just coming back in to do the intro. I'll just head on over to the tutorial portion so you can see how to make this vest. Here are the supplies that you will need. These are the pillowcases that I purchased. These I got honestly I think last year from Savers, but I just never ended up using them. I have this right here, and I'm also thinking of binding it with this bias tape. And I also have this little vest right here that I'm going to use as a template. So let's get started. I began by sketching out my idea, which was just to create a cropped vest with an open front and originally it was going to be a tie closure, but I decided later on to change it into a frog clasp. But this is what I planned out. I like sketching things out just so I have a greater vision of what I want to create and helps me stay focused. And this is what I ended up with. Here is the vest on. I want to make some adjustments to the fit. The neckline obviously is going to be rounded, so that's going to be changed. I'm going to raise the armhole, flare it out a little bit, and then crop it here. Here's everything laid out. I have this piece of craft paper, which I'm going to use to make my pattern. And I'm just going to start tracing the front. The seam for the shoulder actually starts lower than the rest of the jacket. Start tracing here up to here is where I want the armpit to end. I'm going to put my finger here. Know that this is where the seam is, right here. And I think I want the neckline to go down to maybe here. Put my finger where it's supposed to be, lift the fabric, and then I'm just going to connect it. I need to add seam allowance, but because this garment is going to be bias bound, I only need to add it to where the front meets the back, so that would be right here, which is the shoulder, a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then I'll add another 1/2 inch at the side. Okay, so that is the front. See, the back will be almost identical. I'm going to copy this starting from the armhole. Then back neck. Now I'm going to pull where the seam is right here up, so it's lying flat. Then add the seam allowance on just the shoulder. And the side already has a seam allowance included because we copied it over. I'm just gonna mark where the seam allowance is, just so we know. And then this seam right here is gonna be cut on full because I didn't want to make 2 pieces for the back. Okay, here are the 2 different pieces. This is the back and this is the front. We're gonna move on to the next stage, which is cutting out my pattern pieces. I'm going to fold my fabric just so I can lay my front pattern piece on and make sure that it's symmetrical. I also do the same with the back piece, and then I start pinning all of my pattern pieces into place just so nothing moves around when I am cutting out the fabric. Then I start carefully cutting out my pattern piece, just making sure that I am not actually hitting the pattern paper. So now that everything is cut out, I am going to cut open the front right here because this is, it's supposed to be open on the front, but I'm not going to cut the back on the fold just because I don't need a cut in the back. Then I go ahead and remove the backing piece that was already on. This was just the other side of the pillowcase. If you're using regular fabric, then this is obviously a step you don't need to do. So far, this is how the vest is gonna look. Now it's time to cut out the same pieces in my lining fabric, and then I'll come back. So the lining pieces are cut out. So what I'm gonna do is attach these at the side seam first, and then the shoulder seam. So what you have to do is put right sides together. Sew that down, and we'll do that also for the other side. Right sides together. So this is what it should look like so far once you have all the seams put together. Now I'm just gonna go ahead and do the same thing for the lining pieces. Here is a lining piece. This is what it looks like. I know it may be very tempting to want to skip this step, but ironing and trimming your threads is really important in making sure your product looks good at the end. So go ahead and iron open all of your seams just so everything lies nice and flat when you sew the final product. I also snip the edges of each seam just because I want to make sure there's not too much bulk when I add the bias binding later on. So this is how it looks so far. I'm liking it. The fit is pretty good. I'm a size medium. I like how this lined up because I cut it on the fold. So now I just need to add a basting stitch all around the edges so that when I add the bias binding, it doesn't move around. Now we're gonna start basting the lining piece onto the main piece. So how you do this is just putting the wrong side to wrong side and then just sewing with a wide stitch all around. Now everything has been sewn down, but as you can see, there's a little bit of overhang. So I'm just gonna go around and trim that all off so it's even. And then we can move on to adding the bias tape. Everything looks neat now. I'm gonna go ahead and add the bias binding. So here's the bias binding that I'm gonna use. It's the extra wide double fold type. So I'm not perfect at explaining double fold bias tape, so I'll link a video that shows how to do it better because I'm actually not very good at it either. So I'm starting at the outside back center right here and leaving a little bit of overhang. Then just gonna start stitching down here all the way around, doing the mitered corner. I don't think I've ever done this before, so hopefully it goes well. Now I have the bias attached. I just need to flip it over onto the right side and then sew. Here is the vest with the bias binding pinned all around. Starting at the back, neck, back center neck. I'm gonna just start sewing everything down. This is pretty much how it's gonna look finished. I just need to add the bias binding on the edge, and then I bought a little frog clasp that I'm gonna put right here just to have like a cute little closure, and then we'll be done. So let's get on to putting the bias binding onto the armholes. So the next step is to just iron all of this down so that it lays flat, and then I'm gonna add the little frog closure on top so we can have a finishing, and then we'll be done. Now we are done with the vest. This is what it looks like. I didn't have time to take a dedicated video of me trying this on for this vlog just because I actually sold it at Frogtown Flea Crawl last weekend, or this past weekend on September 23rd. So that's a really great feeling. I'm so glad that someone likes it and wanted to purchase it. It's one of the best feelings when someone wants to buy something that you designed and handmade, and I'm just so glad that I was able to recycle these pillowcases into a new garment. I hope you guys liked the result. Let me know if you have any questions regarding how to make this or just anything in particular. I'm all ears, and I'll see you guys in the next video.